Welcome to a special edition of Billy's Books.
Today we're going to review Leia, Princess of Alderaan.
Welcome to Billy's Books. Welcome to Billy's Books. Today we're going to do yet another Star Wars book, but we have a special guest today. It's Kate, who also read the book.
We read it together out loud.
Isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
So it's fresh in our minds. I'm always wondering about Star Wars books, whether or not they're young adult books, and I'm pretty sure this one is meant to be a young adult book.
Does it seem like a young adult book?
It seems like a young adult book to me because, she has these teenage thoughts, and then she gets all these incredible pearls of wisdom from her mom, a lot, and dad, and all the wise people give lots of compassionate, kind recommendations during the plots and to soothe her.
Yeah, I think it would be a good book for a young woman to read, particularly one who's going to become a queen someday of a major planet, or thinks she's going to become queen of a major planet. Spoiler alert, planet doesn't do so good.
No, and they keep on foreshadowing that. It's really painful. She's like, oh, I love Alderaan, it's like this perfect thing. The Empire would never mess with it because we're so, we're doing such a good job, and all this stuff. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the book starts with her day of demand. She turns 16, and so being a princess, they have a big ceremony. Her mom is the queen, and her dad is the viceroy, Bail Organa, and the queen is Breha, or however you pronounce it, Organa.
Yeah.
And they have a little ceremony where she says, I'm old enough, I claim the crown, and they say, okay, but you must prove yourself. And then the next several chapters she tries to prove herself.
One of the things I think is interesting about this book, and I think probably a lot of modern stuff, is it's still really wedded to this monarchy stuff, and yet they kind of know, the writers, like, monarchy's maybe not that cool these days, so they try to really say, like, okay, well, it is a monarchy and it is based on family, but, they work really, really hard. They keep talking about how hard they work and how, she has to prove herself in these different ways, and how it's a life of service, and, their palace isn't as nice as I guess bad monarchs' palaces or something. So I thought that was kind of trying to play it both ways politically.
The benevolent dictator.
Yeah. And kind of like with what's her name, who married her mom.
Yeah.
Padme, yeah. Like, she was a queen, and then they were like, oh, but it's an elected position.
Well, mention Padme because in one of the good deeds she has to do, she goes to a moon of Naboo, which is her mom's planet, to do some do-gooding or whatever. And every time she tries to do a good do-gooding mission, she gets herself knee-deep in trouble, and that happened there as well, and so she ended up getting taken to the local governor or constable around there, and when Princess Leia walks in, he's like, yo, what's going on here? And he gets really weird, and she doesn't know why the whole time, and he eventually extracts from her, and he's like, oh, I see, you're an orphan, and how old are you? 16? He does the math and everything like that. And the assumption is, they never out and say it, but the assumption is that, well, Leia looks a lot like Padme, doesn't she? So my assumption was that governor, she looks so much like Padme that he's freaked out about it.
One thing that makes me think of is, so a big part of the book is sort of her parents, who are part of the rebellion, but they don't want her to know about it or be part of it because it might be dangerous, and she's too young, and then, kind of, okay, maybe she will be, and how. But you never see them have a discussion about her knowing about her own parentage. Because you would think that would also be part of her becoming an adult and being able to be trusted, is knowing that she's the daughter of Darth Vader, which they know, right?
They must know, yes. And I think she actually says, wow, it was really weird at Naboo. And I think her parents are like, that is strange. Change the subject.
Yeah.
They still don't want to tell her. And I think, and it's a lot of that is about witness protection and all that sort of thing.
A lot of the things I think about this book aren't actually about the book per se, but how it relates to the rest of the Star Wars universe. But I don't know if people would read these books otherwise. I mean, I don't know what it'd be like to read it otherwise. It was a good story, but I would assume that people read it because they're interested in the whole thing.
Yeah, I would say so. So one of the things that our frustrated 16-year-old girl is that she has always been very close to her parents, but as of late, they have been sort of absent parents, always going to meetings, and she thinks that means that they don't love her anymore, and in the early half, and she gets all worried about it, and eventually it becomes obvious over time that, well, they're doing a rebellion thing, and they're trying to keep it secret and trying to protect her.
Yeah. As having been a young woman, I was surprised by how concerned she was still about her relationship with her parents, but it might be a single kid thing too.
The only child, also, she had been probably more pampered and...
Yeah, she was very isolated. I think that was also part of the thing about her being a princess.
Yeah.
Or a princess.
We saw it in the movie Episode 8, The Last Jedi, that when Leia goes into a coma, somebody else has to take over the rebellion, and that is Admiral Holdo. And we meet in this book a young 16-year-old Admiral Holdo who's not yet an admiral, and not yet an admiral. And but she's just some sort of weird kid, and she's extra weird. And early on, Leia's put off by that.
I really liked her. She was really fun, and her culture, which they explore a little bit, is really fun too. They spend a lot of time talking about how wacky her hair color is, which is I guess, I mean, in the movie it's purple, and
Yeah.
I thought that was just her planet's hair color,
Yeah.
and maybe it is, but she dyes her hair a lot of different colors in this book, which again they sort of talk about as if it's like some crazy wacky thing, which, considering it's not a crazy wacky thing now, sort of surprised me as a young adult.
Yeah, and also the fact that, there's a zillion planets in this galaxy, and a zillion different races, many of which have, 4 eyes and,
Yeah.
tentacles come out of their heads, and multicolored tentacles at that. So it is weird that, just the girl with the brown hair thinks that the girl with the pink hair is weird.
I think maybe it's part of Alderaan being somewhat traditional in a way.
Maybe so.
So is in the movie, was she still supposed to be dyeing her hair and being wacky?
Yeah, she had pink. I think she had pink hair in the movie, and I remember because when Admiral Holdo steps up in the movie, everyone's like, "What the?" Because she's so not military looking. She looks really kind of like a hippie, and she speaks softly, and what's his name and the hotshot boy that she eventually tells off doesn't take her seriously. He's like, "That's Admiral Holdo?" Like,
I didn't really love her in the movie that much, but I like her character in the movie now a lot better, having had this sort of backstory of who she was as a kid.
Yeah, she's cool. She young Holdo. She's kind of weird, and she comes across as really flighty. And Leia, being a very grounded, down to earth person, can't take Holdo seriously because she's all weird and hippy dippy and says these obtuse things all the time. But then she'll just come from left field with this little pearl of wisdom, and eventually Leia's like, she's actually brilliant.
She's simple like a Buddha.
Yes, indeed. So she keeps on going on different missions. She goes to give some food to some farmers and gets in trouble there, and exposes something, and then she goes and does another mission where she discovers something else and gets in trouble for that, and then she actually, as a 16-year-old, when things don't go right, she stamps her feet. This is early on, which is great. But and of course this is a real book with real characters who actually grow. There's character development during the book, and of course our heroine does the most of all. She also has her first love interest.
Yes, and I don't think they do we know if they have sex, like, do they? Because I was wondering that too with a young adult.
Oh yeah, it was there's a kissing scene. I remember joking afterwards, and the next chapter opens up with a rolling beach of water. But it's ambiguous. They could have just kissed. We don't know. It's all very innocent, and as it should be. It's none of our business. But the guy she likes is named Kier. He's a regular, probably noble but not regal Alderaanian.
He's a super nice boy and not a scoundrel.
He's not a
thought was
scoundrel.
interesting.
Yes. as she eventually learns about the rebellion, she's much more. She has to guard her words with all of her friends, and eventually lets her guard down with him. And we find out that he is also somewhat frustrated with the Empire. But one of the things that happens with her parents and him is that they have different ideas about what to do with the oppression of the Empire. Do you stand up for yourself and get crushed, or do you go along to protect, and things like that?
One of the things I thought was interesting is there are all these young people are friends in this thing called the Apprentice Legislature, which is sort of like the Model UN, I guess, except it actually has things that they can decide. Maybe the Model UN is sort of given little tasks or something too. But I thought that was, so they're all kind of nerdy in that way of studying.
Oh yeah, there's some other good characters too. There's a very rich guy who's kind of really into himself and everything like that. So you have to talk like this when you imitate him.
Yeah.
And there's just there's some turtle guy or some snake guy who has lots of S's in his name.
Oh yes, Sam, or something like that.
Samson something.
Yes. It was fun. It's fun to read aloud for that reason.
One of the things that Haldo says is she has some wisdom. There's a big theme about activism and happiness, and one of their themes is strength through joy.
Yeah, there's a whole thing, which we kind of lost later in the book, but in the first part of the book, yeah, there's a lot of discussion about how it's important, even if you're fighting the good fight against evil, that you should still, be happy and experience joy and take time for yourself. And I wondered if this was sort of a message that the author was trying to tell young activists or young people in general, because everybody's so serious and angry, and there's that whole if you're not upset, you're not awake or whatever. And I like that, because I also think that just being angry and upset all the time is a good way to not be very effective.
Burnout.
Yeah. So I appreciated that.
That's another example of why I think it's a young adult novel, because Leia goes through all these feelings and has all these thoughts, and you show how not only that other people provide examples for her of how to handle these thoughts and feelings, but also that she, as time goes on, does more of the processing of her thoughts herself as she gets older and more mature. She spots her own erroneous, she sees herself judging Haldo, and she's like, well, that's not really cool, because actually, and I think it's really good.
Yeah. You not only hear the words that she's saying to people, but you see the words that she's saying inside her head in italics, and so you can kind of watch her growth from both sides, which I thought was nice.
So, any other thoughts?
I liked it. I think it would be good for young women to read, or anyone who's interested in Leia. It did not really it did talk about her hair, and it talked about braids a lot, but it did not give the backstory of her little hooties.
Oh yeah. Well, they do at one point they do mention the two side buns as a festive thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She has a special droid. Leia has a droid 2V, who's like a servitor, specifically designed to dress up royalty, and she and all these really important things are happening, like intergalactic war. But this droid is more concerned about her hair and that her dress looks right, so she can present herself, and that's pretty funny. I think this is the same writer who wrote the Padme book. I hate to be wrong about that, but and so they do focus a lot on ceremony. They did the same thing in the Padme book, talking about all the special hair buns and braids and stuff that they do, and the interesting clothes and stuff like that. And both those books are interesting and very detail oriented. Another reason I think it's a young adult book is there's only 2 or 3 subplots going at once instead of 5 or 6. So it's actually a relatively easy story to follow.
Wow. Yeah, I found it kind of complicated. I mean, the people, there were a fair number of people, but also each one of these places that she visits sometimes, or different threads that she gets involved with, there is still a lot to keep track of. So if the other Star Wars books are more complicated, that might be a bit much for me.
Yeah. Some of these books they're like, well, it's the age, it's supposed to be 8th grade reading level, but I'm gonna use the 8th grade vocabulary, but I'm gonna have all sorts of complicated plots going at once. And but yeah, this has 3 stories going at once, which is all I need. So
yeah, I felt like there was enough.
I'm just going to go ahead and say I like this book and you should read it.
Yeah, you do.
If you can't review.